Hi and welcome. I'm Melissa Green, a Technology Accessibility Training Specialist with the Center for Instructional Technologies Technology Accessibility Team. The Center for Instructional Technology, or CIT, is a unit of the university's Office of Information Technology, and our team, the Technology Accessibility Team, works to ensure that all technology users, including those with disabilities, have a functional and accessible technology experience with the university's websites and the technologies we use for teaching, learning, and doing the business of the university. You can find more information about our efforts on our website at accessibility.ua.edu. From online course materials to documents and presentations, we all share some responsibility when it comes to creating accessible content. This session provides a brief introduction to designing for accessibility, the importance of accessible design, and high-impact practices digital content creators can apply to create accessible documents, images, audio, video, and web content. Just a quick moment for housekeeping. This slide includes a picture of me. I have my webcam turned off, but I thought you might like to see who you're speaking with today. So that's me, Melissa. To improve audio quality, I've muted everyone by default, but when you want to talk, just click the microphone icon in the bottom bar or in your Zoom control bar, wherever you have that, to mute or unmute yourself. You can also choose to have your camera on or off, but please do mute your microphone when you're not speaking. When I'm talking or sharing my screen, please write in the chat box and let me know if you can't see or hear something. And you're welcome to use that chat box throughout. I may not be watching closely while I'm talking, but I'll do my best to check in every once in a while. And if I don't see your question or comment immediately, don't worry, I will come back to it at the end. This session is being recorded, and I'll send you a link to that recording via email in the next few days, along with links to resources shared during the session. All that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. First, the case for accessibility. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. This quote from Tim Berners-Lee really sums up for our team what this accessibility stuff is all about, and that's equal access and opportunity. Access to information and communications is also a basic human right, according to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But just who are we talking about when we talk about disability? And who are we leaving out when we fail to design for accessibility? Figures from the World Health Organization indicate that about 15% of the world's population lives with some form of disability. In the Census Bureau's latest American Community Survey, an estimated 13% of the US population reported a disability. The latest data from the US Department of Education indicates that 11% of undergraduates at degree-granting post-secondary institutions report having a disability. We have to be careful with statistics, though. They often rely on self-reporting. Many students don't register with disability services, and the definitions of disability vary across these measurements, making it hard to make comparisons. And we also need to remember that the disability experience is diverse and deeply personal and can't be adequately counted or summed up just by looking at numbers. However, statistics can give us a bit of an idea of just how many people we leave out when we fail to ensure our projects are accessible, and it is quite a few. Designing for accessibility benefits everyone, though, and not just people with disabilities. There's a significant overlap between making digital materials accessible for mobile device users and people with disabilities. Some ways in which that plays out. Someone using their mobile phone in bright sunlight and someone who is colorblind may both have difficulty perceiving color. Both the smartphone owner attempting to watch a video in a noisy environment and the deaf or hard of hearing user may be unable to hear the audio track. So improving access for one benefits the other. While accessibility and usability aren't the same thing, everyone can benefit from intuitive and consistent interactions and elements, and accessible web content is generally more usable. Accessibility also increases findability and search engine optimization. Proper heading structure, descriptive link text, those are things that are a boon to both accessibility and search engine optimization. Alternative text for images and transcripts and captions for multimedia can expose online content to search engines. One example of this is Google image search. So if you've ever used Google image search to find an image, you've experienced this. Among other things, Google uses the alternative text descriptions that are provided to describe image content to help determine the subject of an image and therefore the best results to return. If those reasons aren't compelling enough for you, consider this. In many cases, accessibility is required by law. That's certainly the case for us at our public university. If you live in the United States, applicable laws include the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, specifically sections 504 and 508 of that act. The ADA is comprehensive civil rights legislation that protects people with disabilities from discrimination in public services, programs, and activities. And while the ADA doesn't explicitly address web accessibility, it does require that state and local governments and businesses and nonprofit organizations that serve the public communicate with people with disabilities as effectively as people without disabilities. The Rehabilitation Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in programs conducted by federal agencies, but also in programs receiving federal financial assistance, in federal employment, and in the employment practices of federal contractors. The portions of the Rehab Act that are relevant to accessibility are Section 504, which states that programs or activities receiving federal money must not discriminate on the basis of disability, and Section 508, which requires information technology procured or used by the federal government to be accessible to people with disabilities, including employees and members of the public. In higher education, additional laws and requirements apply. In 2010, in response to a complaint filed by the National Federation of the Blind, the U.S. Department of Justice entered into a settlement with colleges and universities that had been using the Kindle e-reader as part of a pilot study with Amazon. At the time, the Kindle was inaccessible to blind students. The menu and the control features of the device did not include text-to-speech functionality, so one had to have use of their sight in order to use the Kindle. In a subsequent Dear Colleague letter to colleges and universities, the U.S. Departments of Justice and Education stated that requiring the use of emerging technology that's inaccessible to students with disabilities constitutes discrimination under Section 504 and the ADA. And in that letter, also reminded colleges and universities of our responsibilities to ensure students have equal access to technologies used for teaching and learning. Universities are now charged with planning for accessible technology tools, services, and information. According to the Departments of Justice and Education, public education institutions must provide accessible programs and services, either directly or through equivalent facilitation. So things need to be accessible, or we need to have a plan in place to provide equal access. We also need to have a plan for how technology resources will be made accessible, demonstrate progress toward fulfillment of that goal, and keep lines of communication with our users open and obvious. So what do we mean when we say that technology must be accessible? The U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights Policy Guidance defines accessible as follows. Accessible means a person with a disability can acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. In other words, the person with a disability must be able to obtain the information as fully, equally, and independently as a person without a disability. Most of the digital content we create can be made fully accessible, and we should strive to do that. But if the university must use a technology that is not fully accessible to users with disabilities, we have to ensure that equally effective alternative access will be provided. An example of equally effective alternative access might be a mobile app that students use to identify molecular models. Let's say that an instructor would like students to use this app, and it's really the only app out there that allows students to identify those molecular models. The learning outcome in this instructional scenario is student will be able to identify molecular models, not student will use a mobile app. So if the mobile app isn't fully accessible, equally effective alternative access might mean directing students who can't use it, maybe because they're blind or have low vision, to a website that has audio descriptions of molecular models. In the physical classroom, one might use tactile models instead. So again, ideally, we choose or create technologies that are fully accessible. In the instances where that is not possible, we provide a plan for equally effective alternative access. Two sets of standards and guidelines are most commonly used to determine if web content is accessible. The standards specified in Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, which apply to technology procured or used by the federal government, and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, which Department of Education Office of Civil Rights resolution agreements have referred to as a benchmark for measuring the accessibility of online content. Many colleges and universities strive to meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, including ours. These international guidelines are developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, which is the governing body of the web, and the guidelines serve as the basis of most web accessibility law in the world. Version 2.0 of these guidelines is based on 4 principles, and that is that in order to be accessible, content must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. WCAG 2.0 consists of 3 priority levels that act as an industry standard, with A being the minimum level of conformance and AAA being the level of conformance that ensures access to the greatest number of people. So if your content meets A requirements, many people can access it. If it meets AAA requirements, most people can access it. AA is somewhere in between. This is an exciting time to be doing accessibility work at UA. Since 2015, UA administration and UA web professionals have been working to ensure our public-facing and campus-wide web resources meet WCAG 2.0 AA over the next 4 years. So that's now 2019. The university recently established a web resources accessibility policy that adopts WCAG 2.0 AA as its standard to address the accessibility of public-facing web resources, campus-wide web resources, and web resources needed to conduct core university administrative and academic functions. In the follow-up email following this webinar, I'll send you a direct link to that policy. Let's talk a bit more about WCAG's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, which is collectively referred to as POUR. In order for content to be perceivable, it must be available to the senses, either through the internet browser or through assistive technologies. People who have full use of their site are able to read text, view images, understand visual cues afforded by layouts, understand the symbolic meaning of colors in certain contexts. For example, red means stop and green means go. People who have full use of their hearing are able to listen to audio and video. But since not everyone has the full use of those senses or the same abilities, one of the main keys to accessibility is ensuring that information is transformable from one form to another, so it can be perceived in different ways. Providing digital text rather than an image of text means that text can be transformed into audio by screen readers and into Braille by refreshable Braille displays, making it perceivable to users with visual disabilities. Audio is transformed into text through captions and transcripts, making it perceivable to users who are deaf and hard of hearing. When content is operable, users can interact with all controls and interactive elements using either the mouse, keyboard, or an assistive device. So in the context of a website, there aren't any functions on your website that require the use of a mouse. Someone who uses a keyboard only is able to use things like date pickers, navigate forms, and so on, open and close, pop-up, or other dialogues. Understandable content is clear and limits confusion and ambiguity. And when content is robust, a wide range of technologies can be used to access it, and not just assistive technologies, but also a range of devices and browsers too, which I think further illustrates how accessibility benefits everyone. Everyone can benefit from content that works across different operating systems and browsers. Following HTML and CSS standards is key to constructing robust content that's functional across technologies. Now, how can we create content that people with disabilities can perceive, operate, and understand, and that works across a range of technologies? That's a pretty tall order, and there's no way we can address the entire sort of spectrum of the disability experience and the range of available technologies during the rest of our time together today. So we're going to focus instead on a few very impactful practices that you can start implementing right now, no matter what kind of digital content you're working with. Microsoft Office documents, PDFs, images like the ones that you post on social media or digital signage, for example, websites, or even email messages. Okay, first, headings and lists. A key digital accessibility principle is helping the user navigate to relevant content. Headings and lists add structure and meaning to documents and web pages by labeling each content part and indicating the order and relative importance of those parts. In order for your documents and web content to be accessible, it's important that you organize that content using true headings and lists. This slide includes a few screenshots. On the left side of the screen is an image of a Microsoft Word document titled University of Alabama Traditions. It's primarily text. It does include one image of the script A used by the University of Alabama. It includes information about traditions at the University of Alabama and is categorized into headings such as football, with subheadings, beginnings of football, the Crimson Tide, the elephant, and so on. On the right side of this slide are some screenshots from Microsoft Office functions that I'll describe verbally in just a moment. Someone who does not have full use of their vision can't see the larger or bold font used to indicate titles, headings, or subheadings, but they can perceive the appropriate markup and use it to navigate through a document or web page with their screen reader or other assistive technology, like a switch or a mouth stick used to access and control a computer or smartphone. You want to use true headings rather than simply changing the font, enlarging the font size, and making the text that you want to be perceived as a title or a heading bold. So in this document, yes, the title and headings have some visual formatting that makes them stand out. The title, University of Alabama Traditions, is larger than the body text. It is a dark blue while the body text is black. The headings and subheadings also have some visual formatting applied. Again, different font weight, font color. However, these headings are not and title are not just visual. They were created using the styles function in Microsoft Word. In Microsoft Word, a quick way to see if your document includes appropriate heading styles is to turn on the navigation pane, a screenshot of which is present on this slide. If headings are missing or improperly nested, you can use the styles options to fix them. So again, when using authoring tools like Microsoft Word, rather than just using visual formatting to create the appearance of titles, headings, and other formatting, you want to use the built-in styles or other formatting tools to indicate that information. Looking at web content, where we most frequently see this go astray is using, again, text formatting, like font size or color or weight, to give the visual appearance of headings rather than using actual headings and other styles. This slide includes a screenshot of the WordPress visual editor. The author of this WordPress page or post has applied some built-in WordPress styles. In this case, heading 2 is used for the heading $1 Million Band, and heading 3 is used for the subheadings naming of the $1 Million Band and directors of the $1 Million Band. When the styles are applied, the visual appearance of the text does change, most notably the font size, but more importantly, structural markup is added that allows assistive technology users to navigate through the content more effectively. Another common mistake is using headings to achieve visual results. So marking something that isn't actually a heading as a heading because you like the look of it, or using the various heading levels out of order because you prefer how they appear. So you want the headings to be used in order. Heading 3 follows heading 2, which follows heading 1. The reason why heading 1 is not shown on this slide is because heading 1 is used for the title of the page or the post. So because headings go in order, the first heading in the body of the page or the post is heading 2. So we want to use them, and we want to use them in order. If you want your level 3 heading to look more like a level 2 heading, you can accomplish this with CSS classes. So you need to do some changes to the style sheet your website uses rather than just utilizing those headings for visual formatting. This slide also illustrates that HTML lists, and really any list in a document, this applies as well, lists convey a hierarchical content structure. They're not just there for visual formatting when used accessibly. So true lists, rather than just bullet symbols or numbers, should be used. Unordered lists, which usually appear as bullets, should be used when there's no order of sequence or importance. So if you could rearrange or mix up all the items in the list and it wouldn't make any difference, that's when it's appropriate to use bullets or unordered lists. Ordered lists, which usually appear as numbers or letters, suggest a progression or sequence. So again, we want to utilize the built-in formatting tools, the actual list styles, rather than inserting characters that look like bullets or typing numbers but not formatting them as a list. You can also add headings and lists to the HTML code itself. The example here shows the same content as the previous slide marked up with HTML heading tags. That's the H2 and the H3. And the HTML ordered list and list item tags. That's the OL and the LI tags. Find out what options for headings and lists are available in the tools you use to create digital content and put them to use. Moving on to our next impactful practice. Adding alternative text or alt text for images is also a fundamental principle of digital accessibility. Alternative text provides a textual alternative to non-text content in documents and web pages and serves several functions. It's read by screen readers in place of images, allowing the content and function of the image to be accessible to those with visual or certain cognitive disabilities. It's also displayed in place of the image in browsers if the image file is not loaded, or when the user has chosen not to view images. And alternative text can be read by search engines. Every image needs alternative text that provides an equivalent to the image content. Alternative text can be presented in two ways. Within the alt attribute of the image element, so that's when you have access to the HTML or working with the HTML, or within the context or surrounding of the image itself. Alt text should present the content and function of an image and not necessarily a description of its visual appearance. I'll talk a bit more about that now. When determining the appropriate alternative text for images, context is everything. What's appropriate in one setting for a given image may be very different from what's appropriate in another, even if the same image is being used in both instances. There is an image on this slide that depicts a postgraduate engineering student working in the new electron microscope lab. Okay, well, visually, it looks like a person utilizing an electron microscope. We're going to pretend that this image is appearing on a web page about new developments to the engineering building, and that's what it shows, a postgraduate engineering student working in the new electron microscope lab. If the purpose of the image is to showcase that new building's technologies and spaces, picture of a student or postgraduate engineering student or microscope lab don't really convey the content and function of the image effectively. In that context, if the image's purpose is to kind of highlight that this is a technology that's available for student use, more appropriate alt text might be a postgraduate engineering student working in the new electron microscope lab. If the same image appeared on the electron microscope manufacturer's website, it might have different alternative text. It might go into more detail about the microscope versus who is using it and where. You can create alt text for shapes, pictures, charts, tables, smart art graphics, or other objects in Office documents. In Microsoft Office, to do this, you right-click on the image, select Format Picture or Format Object, and then select the alt text pane. And this is Office 2016. It's a little different in Office 365. After selecting Format Picture or Object and then selecting the alt text pane, in the description box you would enter an explanation of the object. If you export your Word document to a tagged PDF using Save as PDF, the text you type in the description field will also be included in the PDF as alt text. So you want to use alt text function in Microsoft Office to describe your images, charts, tables, smart art, and other visual content. Be sure to enter that description in the description box. The process for adding alt text looks a little different in Office 365 versions of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook. I want to point it out to you because I think it's better and because it will eventually look like this in other versions of the software. To add alt text to a picture, chart, or other object, you right-click the object and then select Edit Alt Text. So it's directly available from the right-click menu. Then, in the alt text dialog, there's just one box for you to type in. You also get a prompt that says, how would you describe this object and its context to someone who's blind? 1 to 2 sentences recommended. And in that box is where you enter an explanation. There's even a feature that uses artificial intelligence to attempt to create that description for you. So you could select the generate a description for me option to activate that feature. If the description isn't accurate or if it doesn't make sense for the context in which you're using the image, you can edit it. And if the image is purely decorative, you can indicate that by checking the mark as decorative box. That's it for Office 365. I'm really looking forward to the Office 365 rolling out across campus and these features rolling out to more versions of Office because I think it's much simpler and more straightforward. For web content, you can usually add alt text by editing the image details in a media library or when you add the image to a content or collection management system using the visual or WYSIWYG editor. This slide includes a screenshot of the image details box that appears when you edit an image in the WordPress visual editor. It includes a field for entering alt text for an image. You can also add alt text to the HTML code itself. This slide includes a screenshot of the WordPress HTML or text editor. The editor includes an image element, defining an image in an HTML page, and the alt attribute of that element providing a description of the image that has been added. So in this case, the image source is a JPEG named Pup Dance Party, and the alt describing that image is puppies dancing. Find out what options are available for alternative text in the tools that you use to create web content and put those to use. If an image has no relevant content or function, if it's decorative or if the textual description of that image is provided in nearby text, then the image should have an empty or null alternative text value. When working in HTML, that's alt equals quote quote. So I'll go back to the previous slide. Alt equals if this was a purely decorative image rather than the words puppies dancing. We'd have open quotation marks and then close quotation marks. If you're not working in HTML and can't provide that null or empty alt attribute, you can leave the description field blank in Office 2016 or in those newer versions of Office. Remember, there was a mark as decorative function. That's what you would want to use for a decorative image or an image that's already described in its context. If an image serves as a link or hotspot, the alt text should describe the links function. And when writing alt text, avoid using words like picture of or image of or link to, as the screen reader technology provides this information. You should also use the fewest words necessary. Remember that prompt in Office 365. How would you describe this image in 1 or 2 sentences? The next impactful practice addresses the use of color. When working with color, you must make sure that color isn't your only method of conveying important information. And this is primarily to ensure your content is accessible to people who have color vision deficiency, sometimes called color blindness. But it's also a principle of universal design for learning. By using more than just color to convey information, you're providing multiple means of representation. When using color, a good question to ask yourself is, could someone understand this content with the color removed? The first image on this slide is a map of the London Underground rail system, where the various routes are distinguished only by the color of the lines. So each train line is a different color. We have the orange line, the blue line, the gray line, and so on. The various stops on the routes are indicated by a white circle with a black outline. The second image on the slide is the same map, but with the color removed. And when the color is removed, there's no way to tell which rail line is which, or on which rail line a particular stop is located, or when looking at a specific stop, which lines serve it. One alternative to that is to annotate the graphic to distinguish the different colors, or in this case, the different routes. This slide depicts part of a map of the DC metro system. Color is still being used to indicate the different train lines, but there are also text indicators. So at the end of the green line, there's a green circle with the letters GR to indicate that's the green line. At the end of the orange line, there is an orange circle with the letters OR to indicate that's an orange line. So even if you and I perceived green differently, we would both know which line was the quote green line. Or if we had difficulty distinguishing between colors like green or red or other colors, we would have those textual indicators to help us out. So it's okay to use color, but there are also text indicators. Another strategy might be to use different patterns for the lines instead of or in addition to colors. This slide depicts a different transit map where that strategy is applied. One line is solid black, another's dotted black, another has just a black outline. Another approach is to use both color and pattern. This slide depicts colored labels used in the Trello project management system. When Trello's colorblind mode is enabled, a different pattern is added for each color, allowing users with color vision deficiencies to perceive differences among labels. Again, I'll use the example of red and green because that's a fairly common form of color vision deficiency. If you had difficulty perceiving differences between those two colors, you could perceive the difference between the horizontal stripes applied when the green label is used and the diamonds applied when the red label is used. I really like this example because even if you're not using Trello, you can use this approach for other systems or types of content. For example, in Microsoft Office, if you create a chart or a graph, when you choose the colors of the bars in your chart or the slices of the pie in your pie chart, you can also apply a pattern, not just color. So this is a strategy that's pretty easy to apply in the content creation tools that most of us use. In order to be perceivable, your foreground color also needs to be significantly different from the background color. So in addition to not using only color to convey meaning, we need to ensure sufficient contrast. The example on this slide is an image of text on a gray, cloudy background. The text reads, "Be someone's sunshine when their skies are gray." Both the foreground text and the background are shades of gray, except for the word sunshine, which is yellow. And this combination is difficult for many of us to read, but it would be especially challenging for users with low vision and users in bright sunlight. There's several different tools you can use to check for sufficient contrast. I'm going to include links to them in the follow-up email. One of my favorites is the WebAIM Color Contrast Checker, which not only lets you check to see if your color choices meet contrast ratios specified by WCAG 2.0, but also helps you pick color combinations that provide sufficient contrast. You enter the hex or hexadecimal codes for the background and foreground colors. And if your color combination fails to pass the test, you can adjust the lightness slider to modify the colors by slight degrees until you get a result that has sufficient contrast. This is used for colors that are used on the web, but you can also use it when selecting colors for other types of images, like the color combinations you're going to use in a document or in an image you're going to share on social media or make available via digital signage. Another tool our team likes is the Paciello Group's Color Contrast Analyzer. It works on the web and with documents and images on your computer. You can enter hex or other color codes, but this tool also has an eyedropper that you can use to select colors to check. So that works really well if you don't know the codes for the colors or don't want to look them up, or maybe you are using a combination of colors that creates a visual effect. For example, you have maybe, let's say, a photograph with a layer with some opacity on top of it. This would be a good tool to use to sort of check the contrast in that case. Both are free, and again, I'll include links to them in the follow-up email. There's also a very low-tech way to see if color contrast is sufficient if you have use of your vision, and that's to print the content in question in grayscale. When I created this image, I was primarily concerned with the contrast of gray on gray, but when this image is reproduced in grayscale, it becomes more evident that the yellow on gray provides very poor color contrast. Another basic principle of web accessibility is making sure links make sense out of context by avoiding phrases like "click here" and "more" as link text. And this is especially important because screen reader users often navigate from link to link, skipping the text in between, or use a keyboard shortcut to view a list of all the links present on the page. When you add a hyperlink to your content, ask yourself, if you read the link text out of context, would you understand what the link is for and what clicking it will do? There's some examples on this slide of links that were originally formatted in a way that wasn't very accessible and they were reformatted in a more accessible manner. For example, a link to an online registration form. Originally, the text read "register here," with "here" being the link text. If you have full use of your vision and encounter that in the context of a page that discusses online registration, that might make sense. But if you're navigating the web, as many screen readers do, by pulling up a list of links or tabbing from link to link, all you're going to hear is "here." Well, what does "here" mean? That's not descriptive enough. So a more accessible link text would be online registration form, as in "to register, complete the online registration form." You should also alert the user when the link leads to a non-HTML resource like a PDF, Word, or PowerPoint file. You can do this by indicating the format of the content you're linking to in parentheses. You just want to make sure whatever parenthetical information you include, in this case PDF, is part of the actual link and not just unlinked text immediately following it. URLs as link text should usually be avoided unless the URL is relevant content. So for example, if we wanted to include a link to a YouTube video on the accessibility website, we would want the link text to be the actual title of the video rather than the URL for the video, which is pretty unfriendly for a screen reader. It's going to be something like youtube.com/ V equals and then a string of alphanumeric characters. So keep your link text descriptive so that folks who encounter links outside of the surrounding context will know what the links are for. The next principle addresses media accessibility. In order to ensure your audio and video content is accessible, you must provide captions, transcripts, and, when necessary, audio descriptions. Captions are text that appear on a video to match its soundtrack, including dialogue and nonverbal sounds like thunder or dog barking. The screenshot on the left side of this slide shows a captioned video playing in the YouTube player. Here, captions appear in white text on a black background in the lower third of the video above the player controls. A transcript is a written record of a video or audio recording. It may or may not include descriptions of filler sounds like or ah, An example of an NPR interview transcript is shown on the right side of the slide. In the transcript, speakers are identified by their names and titles, and their words are transcribed exactly as the speaker says them. Captions can be built from a transcript by breaking up the text into small segments called caption frames and synchronizing them with the media so that each caption frame can be displayed at the right time. Audio descriptions are particularly beneficial for users with visual disabilities. A standard audio description narrates the visual parts of the video and is played in between the video's dialogue and other essential sounds. We're going to look at part of an example here. It's a trailer for the movie Frozen that's presented with audio description. In this case, the audio description is provided by a voice that has an accent. To me, I hear a British accent, but it's the voice you hear that is not a typical American accent. That's the audio description.
From the creators of Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph, Disney. A carrot-nosed, coal-eyed snowman shuffles up to a purple flower peeping out of deep snow.
Ooh, hello.
He takes a deep sniff. His nose lands on a frozen pond. A reindeer looks up and pants like a dog. Seeing the reindeer slip on the ice, the snowman smiles and moves towards him, though actually he's running on the spot.
I must stop here for the sake of time. I'll send out a link to the full trailer in the follow-up email. But in this case, if the audio description weren't present, the viewer, if they didn't have full use of their vision, wouldn't really know anything about what was happening. They wouldn't know that this was animated. They wouldn't know that the characters were a snowman and a reindeer. They wouldn't know what some of the sounds they heard were. A sneeze, hoofs, scraping on the ice, and so on. So that audio description is necessary to provide access to the visual content. You may be wondering if it's necessary to always provide audio descriptions or when it is necessary to provide audio descriptions. If video is produced with accessibility in mind, then audio descriptions are often unnecessary as long as visual elements within the video are described in the audio. Two common types of video produced at the university are things like screencast tutorials, where someone is showing how to complete a task while providing a verbal description, step by step. In that case, if everything that's shown on the screen is described, audio description isn't necessary. Another example might be a lecture recording. If what is shown on the slides, if the instructor is using PowerPoint slides for their lecture, if all of the content on the slide is reflected in what the instructor is saying, then additional audio description isn't necessary. And that's why it's important when you're presenting to describe the contents of your slides. As always, we're here to help, including with captioning. We can provide guidance on how to use the captioning and transcribing features in most players, platforms, and lecture capture systems. Our area also administers grants to caption or transcribe UA-owned video and audio that will be shared on public or campus-wide websites. And you can find information about those grants on our website at accessibility.ua.edu. Let's move on to resources you can use to evaluate the accessibility of the digital content you create. Like the Microsoft Office spelling checker tells you about possible spelling errors, the accessibility checker in Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook on the web tells you about possible accessibility issues in your Office files. The tool generates a report of issues that could make your content difficult for people with disabilities to understand. And it explains why you should fix these issues and then walks you through step by step how to fix them. Newer versions of Office, including Office 365, you can access the accessibility checker via the Review tab. In older versions, including Office 2016, you can access the accessibility checker by going to File, Info, Check for Issues, Check Accessibility. Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, which is a version of Adobe Acrobat that we have available to us through the university's enterprise license for the Adobe products. Adobe Acrobat Pro DC also offers tools that can assist you in creating accessible PDFs. The accessibility checker, full check, and the make accessible action. The full check feature in Acrobat's accessibility tools checks a PDF for many of the characteristics of accessible PDFs. Does it have actual text rather than an image of text? Does it have tags? Does it have a title? Or do images or figures have alternative text? You can choose which accessibility problems to look for and how you want the results reported. And then when the results are shown to you, it works in a manner very similar to the Office Accessibility Checker. It not only tells you what the issue is, it provides a mechanism for fixing it or a link to a documentation which explains how to fix it. Make accessible action is a little different. It actually walks you through the steps required to make a PDF accessible. So step by step, it prompts you to address accessibility issues, such as a missing document description or title. It looks for common elements that need further action, like scanned text, form fields, tables, and images. So you'll probably find yourself using both in different contexts. I like to use the full check to do a check after creating a PDF from Microsoft Office or other tools. I might use Make Accessible if someone's provided me with a PDF that I don't have access to the original source file. When it comes to creating accessible web content, one of our team's favorite sets of tools is the WAVE online web service and browser extensions. WAVE stands for Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool, and WAVE helps web developers and content creators make their content more accessible by providing visual feedback about its accessibility, by presenting a web page with embedded icons and indicators. So WAVE can't tell you if your web content is accessible, only a human can do that, but it can help you evaluate the accessibility of your web content and teach you a bit about accessibility along the way. WAVE is easy to use. To evaluate a page, you either enter its address on the WAVE website, which I'll send you a link to, or you navigate to the page you want to check and select the WAVE icon in the Firefox or Chrome browser extension. WAVE then brings the underlying accessibility information of a page to the forefront so it can be easily evaluated in context. And that's what we're seeing on this slide. It's a screenshot of a homepage for a fictional university, accessible university. It's been evaluated using the WAVE Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool. So we see a series of icons and indicators overlaid on top of the homepage. WAVE presents the page with the embedded icons and indicators. Each icon, box, and piece of information added by WAVE presents some information about the accessibility of your page. Looking at the left sidebar, a summary shows the total number of errors, alerts, features, structural elements, HTML5 and ARIA elements, and contrast errors found on the page. Selecting details, represented by a red flag icon, shows a full listing of all of the WAVE icons on the page. The documentation panel, represented by a blue eye information icon, provides an explanation of the WAVE icons and how you can make your page more accessible. So what the error or alert means, why it matters, how to fix it, and so on. Finally, the outline view allows you to see the heading structure of the web page, so you can verify that headings are present and used correctly. All members of the UA community also have access to Accessibility Management Platform, or AMP, which is a comprehensive accessibility testing and reporting tool. WAVE works well for evaluating single pages. AMP might be more appropriate if your primary work responsibilities include web development, or you manage a large website or a large number of websites, accessibility management platform AMP will allow you to scan multiple pages or multiple sites at the same time. It is not as easy to use as Wave, but it's more comprehensive. AMP can be accessed via our website, accessibility.ua.edu, where you'll also find step-by-step guides to help you get started using it. That's all I have for us this morning. At this time, I'm going to stop the recording and ask if anyone has questions or thoughts to share. Before I stop the recording, I'd just like to remind everyone that we are here to help. You can visit us at accessibility.ua.edu. You're also welcome to reach out to us by sending us an email at accessibility@ua.edu. I'm going to paste both the website address and that email address in the chat.